COliver, COliver. Yeah, this is a movie I've kind of wanted to talk about for a while. This is one of those old-timey musical-style movies from the 60s that often gets overlooked. Believe it or not, this movie won Best Picture 55 years ago in 1968, and to my recollection, COliver is the last movie to be rated G to actually win Best Picture. Which that in itself is a pure accomplishment. But we've got a couple of bases here. Obviously, the famed novel Oliver Twist by the great Charles Dickens. It's also based on a 1960s Broadway musical with music and lyrics by Lionel Bart. All of his famous songs return in this flick. Food, Glorious Food, Consider Yourself, among others. This is usually the point where I kind of go into the background and the synopsis of this movie, but seeing as how there's probably about, I don't know, 2 of you that don't know the story of Oliver Twist, I think it goes without saying what this is. So Oliver Twist is a workhouse boy. He's played in this one by Mark Lester, and he ends up running away from the undertaker that he's working for, and he falls in with a group of street urchin pickpockets led by the charismatic Artful Dodger. And he's played here by the Oscar-winning Jack Wilde, and I believe this is the youngest Best Supporting Actor winner in Oscar history. And Dodger is the star pupil of the mastermind criminal Fagin, played by Oscar winner Ron Moody. And after that, gosh, a ton of stuff happens. Oliver tries to steal the wallet of the man who would eventually be revealed as his grandfather. He eventually takes pity on the young lad and he offers him a home. All while there's a conspiracy to bring Oliver back to the group of pickpockets, to try and keep their existence under wraps, and it's all very interesting. And this whole plot is concocted by this evil bastard named Bill Sikes, played by Oliver Reed. Now, when you compare this movie to something like Oliver and Company, which I've already talked about on the channel, this adaptation of Oliver is pretty darn close. As in, it's a lot truer to the source material than what Disney pulled off in the 80s. And similarly, you have a lot of musical numbers in this one, which I must say, the direction and the choreography of these sequences is breathtaking. Like, you absolutely cannot dispute the amount of effort that went into every single move in front of the camera. I actually read somewhere that the Consider Yourself number in this movie took a whole 3 weeks to film. And when you look at how vast that number actually is and how many of the ensemble actually gets involved, the 3 weeks number isn't overly surprising. And my gosh, every single song in this movie, ranging from the opening of The Boys in the Orphanage, the child poverty, which is just, there's some dark themes in this movie, man. And I get it. Some people might complain that these songs are completely distracting from the dark undertones of what Oliver Twist is supposed to be. And yeah, with some of the orchestrations in this, it almost feels like another Disney adaptation in its own right. This came out the same decade as Mary Poppins, and a lot of these orchestrations sound very similar. But the memorable songs, point being, way too many to count. The Consider Yourself number that I've already mentioned. There are 2 fantastic scenes that take place in the tavern where Nancy, played wonderfully by Shani Wallis, by the way. She's talking about how great of a life she has, which is, when you look at her boyfriend, it's not very good. But the second scene in the tavern, Papa, that is a great update from the musical version. Papa actually appears at the start of Act 2 after intermission, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the book as to why it's there in the stage version. But Papa in the film is actually meant to be a distraction for Bill Sikes so that Oliver can actually escape his grasp. And I think that's a real strength this movie has. Sure, these musical numbers might spring up out of nowhere, and all the theater detractors might look at this and be like, okay, this is totally ridiculous. Like, why are all these people in the streets of London so freaking happy? And why are they so happy that they have to sing about it? Well, I'll tell you why. The emotion all throughout this 2.5-hour runtime, it is sky high. And the reason why these characters break out into song is because their emotions are so ramped up, they can't help but sing. That is the point of a musical. Tell you how the person is feeling and tell you how a group of people is feeling, in this case, in musical form. And Oliver, I think, definitely achieves that. Again, I cannot help but commend this movie for the creativity and the choreography. Especially when you go into Fagin's lair and the confined space that they have to do all these dance moves. Like, these young boys are creating a carriage when they're simps for Nancy. That's all really fun. And I mentioned Ron Moody as Fagin. He won an Oscar for this movie. I might as well start going into the performances. Ron Moody is so eccentric in this film. Like, yes, with the way he delivers his lines and his solo numbers, i.e. reviewing the situation, this is a sneaky, sneaky little bastard. But just look at how much fun Ron Moody is having in this role. Look at how much energy he's putting into the numbers. You can't help but be endeared to this guy no matter what kind of dirty deeds he's pulling off. Even when he's cooking up deals with the one and only Bill Sikes. Now, Bill Sikes in this, like, good lord, this guy will send shivers up and down your spine. He's played here by Oliver Reed, who is actually the nephew of director Carol Reed. Some people have claimed there was some nepotism involved there. But when you look at how Oliver Reed approached this part, nobody else could have done it. The scene when you first meet him, when the guy comes out from underneath that little tunnel with his dog Bullseye, that whole first scene where he's giving all of the things he stole from houses to Fagin to Price, he doesn't utter one single word in that introductory scene until he summons his dog. And this son of a bitch can even make the act of calling his dog seem intimidating. Like, that takes skill. How is Oliver Reed overlooked for Best Supporting Actor? He's just so creepy and ominous throughout the whole entire film. And he really does make you wonder, why does Shani Wallis's Nancy keep going back to this guy? Well, a lot of that is revealed in the beautiful As Long As He Needs Me, which Shani Wallis delivers wonderfully. She does all of her own singing. She's a trained operatic performer. I love that. Keep that in mind for something else we'll talk about later. But yeah, all of her love for Bill Sikes turns out to be for nothing because he kills her in cold blood. Yeah, when she tries to help Oliver escape and go up to be with his grandfather, who has about maybe a total of 2 minutes of screen time in this, Bill Sikes intercepts her and bludgeons her with his jimmy stick. Goodness gracious, Bill Sikes, man.
She won't be John Nobody no more.
But let's talk about our child actors in this. We have the late Jack Wild playing the very charismatic Artful Dodger here wonderfully. This is a very sly little kid, and you could honestly read him as cocky, but he's a con man. He's very suave. He steals from the wealthy people walking the streets of London in order to please his leader. And I really dig the performance here. Rest in peace, Jack Wild. Great reprise reviewing the situation with him and Fagin, which to my recollection, not in the Broadway version. Like, Dodger does not sing that reprise with him. It's not a duet. It's just Fagin by himself. And I think that's a neat little touch there. But let's get to Mark Lester as Oliver Twist here. This has been a very polarizing performance over the years. And yes, let me admit, this kid was very adorable. But there have been interviews where the music organizer, John Green, has actually called him tone deaf and arrhythmic, which for a musical lead, not very promising. So they actually got his daughter to dub over the singing parts that Oliver has throughout this, and it's, you know, it's pretty enough. But you look back on it and you can tell that this is not Mark Lester singing. And aside from that, the performance itself is fine. I feel like Oliver is a much more interesting character in the Broadway version. As someone who's done the show before, I know that Oliver can be more interesting if you get the right performer. And Mark Lester, bless his heart, he would go on to go into the medical field after he retired from acting at a young age. Good for him. I'm glad he's living his best life. But my big problem is that this movie doesn't present Oliver himself as interesting of a character as he should be. The interesting characters are everyone surrounding him, especially once you start dealing with Fagin's gang, which is about half an hour deep. Like, that to me is where the plot of the movie really thickens and it really picks up. And through all of that, and even before then, when he's in the workhouse going through the funeral home sequence, Oliver very much feels like someone who's just along for the ride. You know what I mean? Like, this movie honestly presents Oliver like a plot device, like just moving him through these various neighborhoods. And even though you kind of understand what his objective is, a happy, loving home, and you certainly endear yourself to that, and it draws you to him in that way. I mean, I don't really think the movie version itself really propels Oliver to be this heroic little kid. Like, he doesn't seem to be the kid that's standing up to authority or anything like that. Like, imagine if Oliver, at some point or another, when Bill Sikes has him in his grasp, imagine if Oliver kicks him in the shins just to run away from him. Like, that could make you think, like, oh my god, this is Kevin McAllister before Kevin McAllister ever came around. Like, he ended up fighting his way out of the funeral home. What was wrong with him fighting Bill Sikes? That would make this kid look like a badass. The fact that he's going through all these motions throughout the runtime It almost appears as if he was picked for this plot by happenstance. You guys remember the iconic, "Please, sir, may I have some more gruel, sir?" Yeah, that whole iconic scene after the iconic opening number. You know why Oliver goes up to Mr. Bumble and asks for more gruel? In this version, it's because Oliver picked the longest straw. Like, you couldn't have propelled this kid to be this super heroic, stand up to authority type of little kid, and he's not going to take no for an answer, and he's not going to take poverty for an answer. You might argue, of course, Zack, he's a little kid. He might not know any better. He might not know any better to know the difference between right and wrong, or when to step out of line. And I get that, but how much more interesting would that have made Oliver as a character? Wise beyond his years. I don't know, guys. This is just something I've been thinking about ever since I rewatched this movie. And it's a great freaking film. It's a phenomenal cinematic achievement. I love this movie. I could sit through it over and over again. It would never get old to me. I love all the characters we get introduced to along Oliver's journey. I love the songs. The dance numbers are so freaking cool to look at. It's an absolute spectacle. But in hindsight, the more and more I think about it, the more development I would have loved for this main character, and I would have loved to have been able to root for him as much as I wanted to. And again, I feel like partially that's due to the performer that they got, because I've seen it, and I've experienced it. You can get a very likable, energetic, stand up to authority type of Oliver, and it can really, really work. But I feel like that lack of spark in our main character, in this version at least, that really holds it back from being a total A+ from me. With that said, I'm still going to give Oliver an A. I haven't seen the other nominees for Best Picture from 1968, but I can tell you for sure that I think this was a more than worthy winner of that award. Let me know what you think of Oliver down in the comments section below. What is your favorite Charles Dickens novel that you've ever read? What's your favorite Dickens adaptation that you've ever seen? Lots of things that we can discuss over here and much more. As always, I love discussing all new things in movies and entertainment here on the regular. And y'all are invited to the party. Do become a subscriber. Tap on that thumbs up as well. Really helps continue to grow this family that we all are over here, talking all things movies and TV. And stay tuned for more videos hitting the channel very soon. As I wrap up these next 2 weekends of my show before closing at the top of October, there's going to be a few cool new releases like Dumb Money, The Creator, Saw X is coming out as well. And before you know it, we're going to hit the month of October, and I'm going to be doing my 4th Halloween special over here. And I can't wait to share with you the titles that I've picked for this year's list. And it's going to be a fun ride, I'll tell you that much. But guys, y'all are the best. Stay tuned for all that and much, much more very soon. Thank you all again for clicking on this video. It really, really does mean a ton. So with all that being said, back talk, commence.